Introduction. India is an ancient society with a history of social organization that dates back to 5,000 to 7,000 years. When studying system advocated by Hinduism was well-defined roles and responsibilities for people of different ages. A person starts out as a student, becomes a householder, gives up his or home to become a hermit, and finally gives up all worldly concerns to become an ascetic. The ashrama system is supposed to be a conflict between worldly existence and spiritual release, which is finally won as an ascetic. Women in ancient Indian society are described as weaker than men and lacking in both physical and spiritual strength. Women were perceived as incapable of spiritual accomplishments and could not own property and could not be sold. The practice of sati, burning of widowed brides, both willingly and by force, was widely practiced in ancient Indian society. Caste as a basis of social organization in India. Caste is a unique method of social organization that is seen only in India. It was a very rigid system of social organization where a person's occupations as well as social class is determined by birth and remains fixed for life. The basis of the caste system is religious and it rises from the beliefs of Hinduism. The religious word of caste is Varna. There are 4 castes or Varna. Each Varna member has to work in a specific occupation which only the members of the Varna are allowed to perform. Each Varna has a certain type of diet. The highest Varna is the Brahmin. Members of this Varna are priests and educated members of the society. The next Varna is Kshatriya. The members of this caste are rulers and aristocrats. The next Varya is the Vaishyas, who are landlords and businessmen. After them are the Sudras, who are peasants and working class people in society. Both these castes are the untouchables who work in degrading jobs like cleaning, sewage, etc. Each caste is divided into many communities called jati. For example, Brahmins are organized in Ayars and Iyengars. Jati is a method of organization for all the 4 castes and as well as the untouchables. Each jati member is allowed to marry their own jati members. People are born into their jati and it cannot be changed. The caste system in India is not a thing of the past. It is still very much alive in present-day India, even among urban, well-educated, upper-class Indians. Most Indian marriages are still arranged according to the caste by the parents of the bride and the groom. Even very educated people with PhDs are found to adhere to the caste system when it comes to marriage in their own families. Although the Constitution of India has made it legal to discriminate on the basis of caste, we can see caste-based matrimonial ads in all the major media to this day, even among the uppermost social classes. Millions of Indians still face untouchability and discrimination in society with segregated schools, separate wells for drinking water, and live lives very similar to their grandparents before Indian independence. Caste-based atrocities and genocide is very much a recurring phenomenon of modern India. The lower castes in India still face poverty and malnutrition both in rural and urban areas. They have less access to education, own less land, and do not access judicial and government services as often as the higher castes. It is not very correct to say that caste was a part of social organization in ancient India. It is very much a part of modern India, and unless our children are educated to the injustices prevalent in this system, the future of Indian society remains bleak. Family. When one reads Indian history in world history textbooks that analyze social phenomena on a global level, there is always the mention of stability of Indian family life and how it has become the backbone of social organization in India since ancient times. Through centuries, India has faced invasions of many different people, the Greeks, the Mughals, and the British, to name a few. But one consistent factor of Indian social life is how Indian culture and Indian society has remained stable and continues due to the strong bonds within the Indian family. Traditional marriages in India are arranged by the families of the bride and the groom, and the marriage was arranged based on considerations of caste and economics and not based on romantic love, as marriage is usually seen outside India. In India, it was considered immodest for a woman to choose her own partner. It is unclear with this practice of arranged marriages become a fixed part of the Indian society because we hear of ancient Indian texts mentoring that women do not choose their own partners. But with the passage of time, it became the norm of families to choose and arrange for partners, and families considered it a dishonor to their family prestige of a woman choosing her own partner. Indians live together under the joint family system even after marriage, which has now disappeared in modern-day India. A Hindu joint family is an arrangement of the previous generations where people of many generations lived under the same roof. All the male members were blood relatives and the women either mothers, wives, unmarried daughters or widowed relatives, all bound by the common relationship. The joint family status was also the result of birth, and what brought the members of the family together is not property but the relationship. The joint family is headed by a patriarch, usually the oldest male, called the Karta, who is the decision makers on all economic and social matters on behalf of the whole family. The patriarch's wife generally exerted control over the kitchen, children rearing, and all religious practices. All money goes into a common pool and all property is jointly held. The joint family system in India has now been replaced with nuclear families as seen elsewhere in the world. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. Living in a joint family is something that depends on how well you can get along with other members of the family. That is not always easy because joint family relationships are based on birth, not choice. Advantages of being in a joint family include the fact that there is less household expenditure and sharing of household duties. The disadvantages in a joint family are lack of privacy and there may be personality clashes between members of the household. Living nuclear is good as far as having your privacy and living life as one wants. On the other hand, the disadvantage is that there is no support group of household expenses and also in times of personal stress and distress. The main disadvantage of nuclear living is that household expenses increase. Social class. The term social class is used to denote people within the same socio-economic classes or people having the same social, economic or educational status. Example, the working class, an emerging professional class. In the Marxist tradition, the notion of class is intimately related to the idea of economic surplus. Social class can therefore be seen to be a kind of social group, which is not legally defined or based on religion. It is generally seen to be a group of people occupying similar social positions. Wealth, income, education, occupation are some of the basic factors to determine social class. Unlike caste, which is determined by religion on the basis of birth, social class is an open group where anyone who satisfies the basic criteria can become a member. There are several classes in a society. If classes are ranked by wealth and income, the difference of wealth and income are seen in members adopting different lifestyle and different consumption patterns. Threefold classification for India. In India, we can think of three major social classes. The working class consisting of the landless labourers, the poor peasants, workers in the unorganized sector, workers in the organized private sector, the dominant or ruling classes, and consists of the following three elements: the industrial owners, the rich farmers and landlords, and the professionals, the top-level managers. In India, industrial owners form the majority of this class in present-day society. Lying between these two is the middle class, the small industrialists, middle peasants in agriculture, the merchants, the traders, and the professionals, the technical experts, the managers, and the skilled workers in large-scale private enterprises, and the large majority of the employees of the state sector. The social classes in India arise into response to the changes brought by the British in economic structure of India. The British administration changed entirely the existing land system. The British abolished the traditional rights of the village community over village land and created individual ownership rights in land making, land private property, which could not be mortgaged, purchased or sold. Till the village ownership of land existed, the village was the unit of economic life. Now cash crops were grown instead of food crops. While expanding railway and transport system, production for market became fairly well established. The commercialization of agriculture led to the growth of trade and commerce in India, which has continued to this day. Over the 7 decades since independence, India has pursued the industrialization and development route, for which the seeds were sown by the British, on its own, and today boasts of being one of the largest and fastest growing economics in the world. This growth has in turn created many new social classes and created more avenues for members of society to improve their position in society by means of increasing their wealth and income. Education. The educational system of any society is totally influenced by its social system. In a static condition, the main function of the educational system is to transmit the cultural heritage of society in the new generations. But in a dynamic and ever-changing society, the function of the educational system keeps on changing. The educational system that exists in such a society must not only transmit the cultural heritage and values, but also prepare the younger generation to cope with all changes in society, present as well as future, them that they might have occurred or are likely to occur in the future. This is more so in societies that has mainly or newly become independent and are in a developing stage. In such modern complex societies, education is called upon to perform the function of becoming an agent of social change. Thus, the relationship between educational system and society is mutual. If we look at the situation between education and society in India, we find that in ancient times, education used to be performed the role of transmitting cultural heritage of a static society. Only the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas received education, and education in ancient India was exclusive. It excluded the major chunk of population from the benefits and privileges of being educated. In modern India, however, with the adoption of the Western model of mass education, education has become inclusive of available to all members of the society, irrespective of caste, social class, or gender. Education has now become a way to transcend social caste, which has earlier fixed as well as social class, since being educated gives Indians access to better jobs and income than their ancestors. Education in India has thus become an instrument of social change. Education has also become a way of organizing society where people are able to choose their own occupation by means of education and not confined to their occupation of their forefathers or due to birth. Today, we have people from backward caste and tribes who can aspire to be engineers, IAS officers and doctors like their grandfathers and grandmothers who could not even dream. Education in India has also become a tool for women's empowerment. Traditional role for women in Indian society was confined to household duties and child rearing. But with modern education, Indian women have reached all spheres of life and are accumulating accomplishments as astronauts, doctors, CEOs, IAS and IPS officers, etc. At the same time, the Indian educational society suffers from many drawbacks in terms of resources as well as curriculum and addressing the needs of many diverse communities in India. In spite of the limitations imposed by limited growth of education and the failure of our educationists to come up with innovations that meet our own national needs, education has become one of the most influential instruments of social change in India. Thus, in modern India, education is neither a controlling force or conserving culture heritage, nor can it be viewed simplistically as an agent of social change. It can be considered as a cooperative force that has captured the imagination of the masses and carries their hopes to bring about social changes as decided by all of them through the democratic process instead of changing brought about powerful forces in society who are a minority but who control resources and the flow of information. Urban versus rural basis of social organization in India. As we have mentioned earlier, while analyzing social class in India, historically, the village was the base of social organization in India. The village community controlled the village land and laid down the rules and norms for everyday life and determined culture, feminine as well as economical life in ancient India. This situation went through a drastic change under the changes introduced by the British in India, who brought in trade and development. This also led to the growth of cities in India. Cities existed in India before the British times also, and in those days the cities were the centers of administration of various empires and the cultural capitals of the country, where art, poetry and literature flourished. The social organization of these cities were also determined by caste, as were all aspects of social and individual life in India in the past. Today we have seen an explosion in the number of cities that have mushroomed in India in the last 50 years. We hear that about 2-tier and 3-tier cities, in addition to metros that are fast catching up in terms of infrastructure and quality of life with the oldest metros in the city: Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata and Chennai. In fact, with the increase in population and population in metros, the smaller towns in India can be said to have better quality of life than even the major metros. The difference in the social organization of urban areas in India of today is that the absence of caste and community in determining occupation and opportunity. While caste and community feelings still exist in the astra of Indian society, we can still see this phenomena as its weakest in life in urban India. Social organization in cities is also more favorable in other marginalized part of Indian society, women. While Indian villages have still retained many of the traditional practices and beliefs that enslave women in very vulnerable roles in terms of economic freedom, self-expression and empowerment. Indian cities offer women more opportunities to become productive members of society and to participate in social life in a more powerful way for themselves and for society. Of course, like every way of organizing society, the urban-rural debate also has its many disadvantages and advantages. People living in cities in India live in very populated and crowded places, where their space of life has led to a severe health crisis in terms of stress-related disorders. Village life in India, however, still retains the charm of living close to nature in traditional roles where the levels of stress are less than in the cities and people still have their traditional support groups to help them in times of crisis. One of the casualties of the rapid adoption of the urban lifestyle in India has been the traditional Indian joint family, where the problems of child care and care of the elderly were never faced. With rapid urbanization, Indian families have gone nuclear and Indian society is facing a huge challenge in terms of childcare and care for the elderly, which has never faced for centuries. The family as the basis of social organization is also breaking down with increasing divorce rates. Conclusion: the above discussions regarding the basis of social organization have brought out some advantages as well as disadvantages that existed in the historical basis of social organizations as well as the changes that are today rapidly sweeping Indian society. India is a country of such vast proportions and diversity that these changes have acquired a force and life of their own and sweeping away centuries of culture and practices. Some of these changes are for the good and some of them are not very desirable. There is the danger that these changes in social organization, if they continue in the same discriminate and uncontrolled style, could lead to the destruction of many good aspects of Indian life that has survived centuries of invasion by outsiders. The need of the hour is therefore for social scientists with deep insight and analysis of the historical and cultural facts of India who can anticipate and channelize the forces of change to bring about social equity, justice, and equal opportunity for every Indian man, woman, and child. We need well-trained social scientists who can bring about a basis of social organization in India that is a mix of the best part in ancient Indian life and in modern Indian life. There are many aspects of Indian life that have traditionally been the envy of the rest of the world, particularly the stability and collectivism of the Indian family. Many of these values and practices are being greatly eroded by the rapid changes taking place in Indian society, which could shake the very foundation and stability of our nation. Therefore, the future planning and policies in India need to pay very close attention to address the inequities that existed in India in the past and address these issues in a wise and timely manner.